section. I was just looking here online at our Twitter feed and just scooting down to us explaining what the show was about today: coronavirus, death, and grieving. And then last night, Nicole jumped online and told us this. I lost my dad 2 weeks ago, went to the service, could not touch, kiss, or hug anyone. I could not hug or visit my dad as he was home the last few weeks of his life. I comfort myself with the fact that I am not alone, as alone I am in this experience. Nicole, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you for sharing something so intimate with us. If you're in our YouTube commentary and a chat section, you too can share your stories. Thank you very much if you're able to do that, or ask our guests questions. You're very welcome to do that. You know how to do that in the YouTube chat. I want you to meet our guests. Hasina, welcome to the stream. Tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on the show, first of all. My name is Hasina Zaman, and I run Compassionate Funerals based in East London, and we run a funeral service for the diverse community. Thank you.
It's so good to have you. Thank you so much for coming. Mahela, remind everybody who you are. Welcome back to the stream.
Thank you so much, Femi, for having me back on. I'm Mahela Desai. I'm a clinical psychologist in Mumbai, India, and I'm co-author of the book, The Coronavirus, What You Need to Know About the Global Pandemic.
Thanks for coming. And Caitlin, it's good to have you on the stream. Tell everybody who you are.
Thank you so much for having me. My name's Caitlin Butler. I'm a chaplain at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, and I'm also a Presbyterian minister.
Caitlin, what are your days like now as a hospital chaplain? What kind of things are you doing that are different than before the coronavirus pandemic?
Mm-hmm. In some ways, insofar as I'm working with patients, families, and staff, my days have not changed. And in others, obviously there's an increased amount of distance that I have to keep from my patients in moments that are so intimate and that otherwise I would intentionally be very close with them. When we have a death, when we have a loss, we always encourage patients and families to touch the body, to be with their loved one, to hold them, to sing to them, to pray for them. And we're having to get creative and think about new ways to mark loss and to create new rituals with people that are meaningful for that moment and meet people where they're at.
Yeah, this idea of touch and comfort when you're trying to grieve, when someone is dying, and that almost feels like it's part of us, that we need to do that. From a clinical psychologist point of view, what is happening when we feel that need to put our arm around somebody or hug them or hold someone's hand as they're passing away? What have we lost right now?
So the grieving process, Femi, involves 5 stages. As Elizabeth Ross has mentioned, and that involves denial. Then there's anger around the situation where one cannot come to terms with it. Then there is bargaining where people feel they could have done more in the situation to help, prevent the loss of their loved one. Then comes the stage of sadness and grief and loss and depression, finally with acceptance. So in this lockdown, what the lack of being able to touch or the lack of being able to sometimes even see your close one gone increases the duration of denial and of anger, making it so much more difficult to grieve and delays the process.
Hasina, I'm just looking at your website here, where you're doing compassionate funerals, and there's an update about the coronavirus, and you're trying to reassure people that they can still have a funeral. But how do they have a funeral when you can't be close to each other? And there's a limit to how many people can be in a space at the same time.
Yeah, so as Caitlin said, that we have had to get creative. As Mahela said, that we are very aware of the grieving process, and I would say that we don't necessarily see them in the grieving process in that stage, but we have had to get more training within the team. We reorganized our space so we can still allow allow the loved one to go and do their wash with, with adequate PPE, making sure we're safe, our families are safe, the bereaved are safe, and even the deceased, they don't pass on the virus to us. So we've had to take on certain procedures. I would say we've been a bit radical, because initially we was doing what everyone was doing. We were saying no, we can't do anything, and we just felt like really like quite tyrants, and it wasn't part of who we were. Compassionate funerals is all about being compassionate in times of death and dying, and having maximum contact and connection and engagement. And then we literally overnight we literally saw that crumble away. So I think 2 weeks we just did whatever we could, and then we said, right, let's find out what we have to do to move through this.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking here, Caitlin, I'm going to share this tweet with you. This is from Laughing is Life. The worst part of this whole COVID mess is all the people dying alone, people losing their loved ones and not even being able to say goodbye. I can't imagine the pain. You are probably the closest to many people as they pass. Can you tell us what that's like?
I would echo that tweet. It's incredibly painful. I mean, I don't think I could have ever imagined anything like what we're seeing right now. And as far as people dying alone and not being able to say goodbye, I think it's really important to help people find ways to say goodbye and to help people figure out how to maintain a relationship with their dead. I encourage families to say out loud the things that they need their loved ones to know, and to hold hope and hold faith that in some way or another that message is conveyed to them. I think about the losses I've experienced in my own life, and maintaining a relationship with my own dead relatives is something that is so intrinsically important, and that has really shaped my life and shapes my days still. And so we find different ways to do that. I've held phones outside of rooms so people can say the rosary aloud, or sometimes I will write a family members. There was a Muslim family recently who I brought a Quran to and wrote on a Post-it note everything that their loved ones wanted to be said to them. And I asked the nurses to read that Post-it over and over and over again when they went into the room to cluster their care, so that the family could know that whether they could be there or not, that their loved one heard their words, and that the messages that they needed them to know were said aloud.
Mahela, I see you nodding. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I feel that palliative care is very critical in these moments, because as difficult as it is for the families to deal with the loss of the one who's gone, and that's a more long-term plan that we need to prepare for. Well, for those who are realizing that their health is deteriorating, time is short, and technology can come to great advantage over here. Even, probably looking beyond just curing the symptoms, even looking at mental health concerns, the anxiety can help soften and ease the situation for those who are passing away and succumbing to COVID-19.
I want to tell you, audience and guests, about this gentleman here. His name is Joe Carpentieri. Joe got a cough back in March. He had a really bad cough, about a week and a half. Other than that, he was really fit, very fit, 72-year-old. He was rushed into hospital one morning, and hours later, he died. And so his family didn't have much notice about what to do and how to prepare for his funeral. And his daughter, Cindy, was kind enough to share with us on the stream what it was like trying to bury somebody during a global pandemic. Here she is.
We were permitted to have 10 people at the viewing, but we needed to enter the funeral home in small groups of 2 to 3 people. So many of our family and friends were not able to join us to pay their final respects. after the funeral home, we processed to the cemetery, where we were able to watch the casket be laid to rest at the gravesite. But we were not permitted to get out of our cars. We were not allowed to have flowers. We could not have a priest come to give a blessing, let alone have an actual funeral. It was very difficult, and it remains very difficult. My mother and brothers are also sick with the virus. So at this point, I've still yet to hug my mother at all since my father has passed. I have been with my immediate family, which my husband and my son, which I'm very grateful to have them here with me. But I've not been able to see any other family members, really. So the grieving process has been very different than what you would consider to be typical.
Sina, we're also getting so many comments in our YouTube chat about experiences that people are having with death and dying and funerals. Victor, for instance, says that in Ghana, the number of funeral attendees are limited to 25 people. Other places, it could be only 5 or 10. So how do you create a funeral for people that is compassionate, but they can't bring everybody they want to bring? What do you do?
What we've been doing is just working with the guidelines and being creative. So we've been saying to families, you can actually. So we've actually bought some tripods. So we set phones up. One phone is just actually filming the whole video, and another phone separately is live streaming the video, so then people can be involved. So we've been using technology. But then also there's some cemeteries that just allows only 5 members, and then they don't even allow any filming. So it's really, some places are really, really tough, and then some places are just much more relaxed, and they have their own streaming service. But what I did want to mention is the same as what Cindy was saying about her father's funeral. Back in early April, we did a funeral for he's a young gentleman who died in his early 40s of Bangladeshi Muslim origin with 4 children under the age of 12. And so what happened is that we said that the viewing can happen because as mentioned, one of the first things that sets in terms of grief is denial. So the families would say, well, how do we know it's that person? And I was saying, yeah, you've got a point. How do you know actually that person? So I said, okay, I can take a picture. Well, how do you know you haven't taken that picture from somewhere else? So anyway, I arranged that the wife to come and do a viewing. And at the last minute, she turned around and said no, that she's not going to come and do a viewing because her children have said that if she goes and she dies, and then they won't have anybody, the children will not have anybody, so they would have lost both of their parents. So in the end, what I did is that I just video called her and showed her husband, and it was really, really distressing because he still had all his lines in. He was double bagged, and I did my best to put soft material around him so he wouldn't look as horrific, really. So that's just as one of the many funerals that I've done.
Just one story out of thousands. Mahela, go ahead. What did you want to add? Thank you, Hasina, for sharing that with us. Mahela.
Right. What I am seeing that in the times of these lockdowns, the biggest challenge is a conflict internally between a lot of individuals. One of logic, where you understand why there's a social distance, although you may logically be able to process why you're not being allowed to meet, why you're not being allowed to see. The emotional aspect and dealing with that is so crucial as well. And in these times, for most, they are fortunate enough, like Hasina was mentioning, to have people around them to let the logic prevail over the emotions. But that a lot of people are dealing with it by just suppressing these emotions, and that needs to be dealt with. And we need to create innovative ways. A lot of the work like Hasina is doing, to allow them alternatives to grieve. It's very unfortunate. If you look at a lot of people don't even have the fortune of seeing their close one who's passed away. If we look at countries as a part of the research for the book that we had written, in China, there was a law, independent of which religion you belong to, you're not, all the bodies were cremated because they feared that the virus would spread if there was a burial. And that was despite conflict, despite resistance from the families. It was almost like the body of the one who has passed away from COVID-19 became state property and laws were passed against it. So these are difficult times and difficult situations. Just to add, even here in India, initially, they had refused burials. We have a large population of Hindus, of Muslims, of Christians. And for everybody, in some form or the other, I think funerals are no more the same that they were. The rites and rituals do not proceed the way they used to. And it's a difficulty, that we have to cope and deal with in these times.
Let me bring in Caitlin here, Caitlin, because there are various different faiths have different rituals about what you do with the body when somebody passes. And it almost seems like COVID-19 is overriding all of those very important rituals and traditions. What are you seeing in New York?
I can't speak so much to the burial processes in New York right now. I know that it's complicated. I know that there have been a great deal of barriers, and also that people are doing the very best they can to accommodate these rituals in a way that is congruent with public health priorities. Listening to my colleagues talk, I'm reminded of the importance of storytelling as something that is such an essential part of all of these ritual grieving processes. And it's something that I'm really encouraging families that I work with to figure out how to, and rather than suppressing those experiences, rather than, it's so easy, right, when we're all at home to not to mark the change in time. What happened, your world this morning looks the same way as your world this afternoon, except there's been this massive hole ripped in your heart somewhere between then and now. And I think it is so deeply important I've heard of Zoom wakes and Zoom shivas. And I think it's really, really important to have sacred space and sacred opportunities for people to share stories about their dead and to speak to their beloveds and to do that in community, because it's not something that can be done alone.
Let me share this with you, because you talked about Zoom wakes and technology, having digital mourning and grieving. Gabriella on Twitter looked at something called Sheldon at a funeral home in Canada. And there you see an iPad in an empty funeral home, but iPad mounted on a device that can move around. And then the relatives can actually be part of that funeral process. I'm going to show you one other thing, because you mentioned Zoom, and this is Raphael saying that he attended a cousin's funeral via Zoom this week. 100 people attended online in a surreal way. It felt comforting. And there you can see that Zoom funeral. But on YouTube, one of the things that we're actually seeing is that some of our audience are not finding these digital processes actually very comforting. Let me just bring up this on YouTube from E. Allen. I'm sad and angry, all mixed up together. Been to 3 virtual funerals. They are cold and hollow. Hasina, what's that like? To not be able to have... Do you know, sometimes funerals are the best time you can have, because you've got family coming from all over the world. You're comforting, you're remembering a great life. It's a very healing process. And then you've got an iPad on a rolly thing, and that's your funeral. Are you even grieving?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. Funerals are a big community experiences for many of the traditional communities, and even the young communities. They come together, they reunite, they connect and talk about the person who's passed away. It's a really, really strong bond that brings a funeral together. And now we're seeing these virtual funerals taking place. I just think it's better than nothing. As much as it may be really surreal, it may be really upsetting that you can't be physically there. I've just literally come off a funeral now, and I was only allowed 10 people at that service, and I don't know how. There's another 18 got through the gates, and even them, they kept saying that this would have had about 500 people on it, and it was being filmed by every single person. I don't know what they were doing because there was no restrictions, but I just think that we have to make the best possible situation of what we have, and tomorrow I've got a funeral where the whole funeral is going to be live streamed. So, the family asked, can they drive into the actual crematorium and watch and be part of it? And straight away the staff said, no, that can't. That it's got gatekeepers on it. So so I know what they're going to do. They're going to sit outside the crematorium and feel part of it. Families are doing whatever they can to be part of that funeral, because it's an essential part of of saying goodbye. It's the final rites, or it's the last rites, or it's the next rites, and so people are going to do whatever they can. And as Caitlin was saying, that to create these stories, keep that person alive, whether it's in your heart through your prayers, or it's through talking about that person for memorialization. Even that's becoming quite big. People are having memorializations on whether it's Zoom or one of the other video platforms, and they are very, very, they're very, very popular, because it means that instead of just attending, now it's becoming a global attendance.
Isn't it strange that suddenly something that was very uncouth to do at a funeral, i.e. take pictures, stream it, tweet it out, seems to be the way that we're all connecting now. I want to bring in one more person, and this is Imam Nihal Khan, who talks about this grieving process and how we have to try and allow ourselves to grieve, even though we're not able to physically sometimes be in the place of our loved ones who's passed away. This is what he told us.
Personally, I must have handled close to 5 or 6 COVID-related janazas, and we have performed tayammum, which is the dry ablution, on those people that passed from COVID. So our traditions and our rituals are being practiced, but at a very minimal level as a faith group. The words that I offer to those who are grieving their loved ones is to know that it is okay to be sad and to sit with that sadness and to feel it. And similarly, as difficult as it may be, know that your absence may be helping someone else not suffer the same fate as your loved one. So I pray we are able to live a very empathetic life, and one which we heal from and we get through after these tough days.
You can tell that's an imam that's been at a lot of funerals. Mahela, I'm just thinking about words of comfort that you can give to our audience, and I'm going to ask you all to do so, if you're able to, from the experience that you've had recently. Mahela, you go first.
Sure. So in providing comfort to those we care about, there sometimes right now is a lot of guilt for individuals who are not being able to make it to these funerals. And to them, I would say, try and have more or use more technology to have smaller personal meetings. We need to acknowledge and understand that the way physical meetings work with 100, 200 people cannot translate the same way with technology. The groups need to be smaller, and we, like Caitlin was saying, we need to allow people the opportunity to also share their stories and join into the grieving process. So not only is it important for friends and relatives to see the grieving process, but to help the family and the close ones go through it. If we have the time permits, I would like to share a story which has a message for all of us in here.
We are at the end of the show, so I'm going to ask all of our other guests, Mahela, if you don't mind, just to give some words of comfort. And hopefully I'll be able to come back to you, find the story, and then I'll share it with our audience online. This is hard to ask you this, Hasina, because you do this professionally, but this must be an unusual time for you. What are you telling the families who are grieving right now as you're doing their compassionate funerals?
So the main thing that we say to the families at the moment is, be with yourself, be with your feelings. As that Imam said, we did a lot of tayammum funerals initially, so it was a tough call. It was a tough time to be in. I felt it was like I was going through like carnage. I was exhausted so much in those first few weeks, and just saying, be kind to yourself, be kind to each other.
Thank you, Hasina. Be kind to yourself, be kind to each other.
Basic.
All right.
Yeah, basic.
All right. Caitlin, right at the end of the show, but I'm going to give you the final word in a sentence.
Sure.
What support can you give people?
A colleague texted me a hadith the other day that said, if you have a sapling in your hand and it seems like the end of the world is near, plant it. And I think that is my hope and my prayer for all of us right now, that these losses, that these stories, that this pain, that we plant our saplings and we do it together and we find ways to be together and to share our stories.
Thank you.
And to remember
Caitlin.
that our dead matter.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Mahela. Thank you, Hasina. Thank you for watching and your YouTube comments as well. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.